Hi folks, Ms. Javner here just to help you with finishing up your lab that we did last week. So your task today will be to work on these conclusion questions, which is writing a claim, evidence, reasoning, and then you will turn in the lab handout either in the basket on my desk or you can take a picture and upload to Schoology. So you're writing a claim, evidence, and reasoning. But here's some hints to help you figure out the claim. So the thing to remember is that an ionic compound is made up of a metal, which is a cation, and it's made up of a nonmetal, an anion. So in this lab, you mixed copper chloride and sodium phosphate together, and you actually created two new ionic compounds. Here are all of the possible combinations of those elements. So we could put copper and sodium together, copper and phosphate together, chloride and phosphate, and sodium chloride. So take a moment to think which of these are valid ionic compounds that have a metal and a nonmetal, and which don't work. So pause and think about which two do we create. So if you go look at the charges, copper and sodium are both positive, chloride and phosphate are both negative. Whereas on this side, copper is positive, phosphate is negative, and sodium is positive and chloride is negative. So those two don't work because they have two cations or two anions together. These two do work because we need opposite charges to attract. So copper, phosphate, and sodium chloride do work. Sorry if you can't see that. My camera's there. So these have opposite charges that can attract. So then I want you to think about those two ionic compounds, sodium chloride and copper phosphate. Which one is in this blue solid? And which one is the clear liquid that was above? So think about what you know about these two compounds and which one might be which. So sodium chloride is actually the clear liquid and copper phosphate is the blue solid. A couple ways you could figure this out is maybe you know that sodium chloride is table salt, and table salt is clear and it dissolves in water. And if you remember, the copper chloride solution that you started with was the color blue, and this copper phosphate, the solid, is also blue. So that blue is from the copper and that stayed through. So there's kind of two ways you can figure that out. So what we're truly trying to figure out is kind of what ratio did we see the most precipitate form? Which test tube did you see the most blue form? And that is going to help us with our conclusion. So you are trying to figure out the formula of the copper phosphate precipitate. And we have to do this experimentally because copper is a transition metal, so it can form more than one ion. And so I don't know what the charge is. So that's why we have to do this in an experiment. So what I want you to do is I want you to think about which ratio did you see the most precipitate, and like star that one. So maybe C is where I saw the most, or maybe D is where I saw the most. Whichever one that you saw the most precipitate, so looking at this value, that is going to be the ratio of ions. So this is going to be a ratio, or this is going to be a ratio. And remember, we measured the precipitate, which is the copper and the phosphate together. So this actually gets you your ratio of copper to phosphate. So we're not really worried about the chloride or the sodium here. So like for example, if letter C was your most, you would have 1 copper for every 1 phosphate. Or letter D, you'd have 3 coppers for every 2 phosphates, or 4 coppers for every 1 phosphate. And this is the ratio of those positive and negative ions in the compound. So remember, when we go ahead and we write a formula, the ratio comes up down here as a subscript. Now, phosphate is a polyatomic, so when you are adding more than one, remember to put it in parentheses, and then you put the little subscript down below. So you're thinking, what's the ratio of copper to phosphate? So again, which did you see the most copper and the most phosphate from? Those are going to be your ratios, which end up being your subscripts. So whatever that is. So again, your task here, is to make a claim. Answer the question, what is the formula of the ionic compound? And again, that is going to come from the ratio from your data table. So it might be helpful to actually do the evidence first, because that's going to figure that out for you. So maybe start with your evidence. Which test tube had the greatest amount? What was the ratio? What was the color? Then make that claim. Work on writing that formula based on the ratio. And then for the reasoning, you're going to explain how you know this. You're going to tell me what you know about ionic compounds, about positive and negative charges, how we write a formula. And there might be some also info in the background section to help. So do your best. Hopefully this video helps you get started. And then don't forget to either submit in person or on Schoology. Good luck, and email me with any questions.